Okay. Hi, everybody. Oh, sorry. Welcome. Hopefully you had a great weekend and are ready to start talking about cheese again, because that's what we're going to be doing for basically now until the end of the class, which, by the way, we got 3 weeks left, and then we're done with LC101. So the end is in sight. Yeah, we're going to spend the last few weeks working on our spring application. Today we're going to spend some time talking about the model. I believe you had an assignment due today as well, if I'm remembering properly. And you'll have, can't remember if it's one or two more. I think it's two before the end of class. One is due, I think, a week from today, I believe, and then the other one's due on the last day of class. So I just want to remind you that as Ryan mentioned, you do have time after the class is over to complete any outstanding coursework and still get completion for the class. So if you are feeling like you're not going to make that deadline in 3 weeks, that's okay. I forget what he said. Was it 2 months? Yeah, you have until 2 months after the course has ended to submit any outstanding coursework and get completion for the course. And so, yeah, just definitely keep that in mind. It's not necessarily time to start panicking yet, although once the meetings are over in 3 weeks, it's going to be a little bit more difficult because while we'll still be available on Slack to help you out, the opportunities to meet in person will be a bit more limited. So it definitely is in your best interest to get as much help here over the next few weeks as you can. So definitely flag down one of the TAs if you need help. If you're stuck on an assignment, happy to give you a push in the right direction. Let us know what you need so that we can get you on track to get everything finished up. Does anybody have any questions about the last few weeks / deadlines / assignments or anything else like that before we talk about some models today? Alrighty, then let's go ahead and start talking about models. This is a little bit of review, and we're going to do a coding exercise a bit later on after we do some review stuff. So what is the role of the model in the MVC framework? We've actually seen the other two pieces already in the spring setup. So we could review that real quick as well, right? The view, what's the view part that we're dealing with? Which part of the code represents the view? The templates, yeah. And then the controllers are in the controller file, so that's the Java, right? That's the logic side. Make sure everything gets connected up and goes where it needs to go. What about the model then? What's the model's role in all of this? I'm sorry? Data, yeah. Model is the data, the information, the actual stuff that the application will be manipulating. So, you know, for the sake of the prep work and in class today, we're talking about cheese, but it doesn't have to be cheese. When you get to the assignments, you'll be talking about, you know, job postings, right? That's going to be your model. So the model is whatever data your application needs to perform its job. And so how is that represented in our code? How do we represent the model in our code? What have we spent the last 3 classes talking about? A class, an object, right? Java objects. Those are going to be our models. So there's going to be instances of Java objects. So the prep work had you go through the task of creating a cheese class and also a cheese data class to allow you to access the objects in whatever way is necessary to complete the particular tasks that the application required of us. And then we need to talk about this too. How do we uniquely identify our objects? So let's talk about the why first, and then we can talk about the how. Why do we need to be able to uniquely identify our objects? Makes coding easier? I'm sorry. Yeah. Yeah, so having a unique identifier so that we know if I'm talking about something with a given ID, exactly which object that I'm referring to. There's no ambiguity, right? If I tell you somebody's name, that does narrow down who I'm talking about, but there are a lot of John Smiths in the world, and so you might not know exactly which one I'm talking about if I give you a name. If I give you somebody's social security number, which I don't have John Smith's social security number because that's not who I am, but that would theoretically help narrow down specifically who I am talking about. And the same concept is true in our code as well with the setting up an ID. So what does this look like? How does this actually work in code? Yeah, go ahead.
I think when you define your class, then assign it a unique ID, and then you create a method that serves as an incrementer.
Sure, yeah.
So it increments the ID every time you create new.
Right, and we've actually seen this in prior examples. So you're exactly right. We can assign a field for IDs, right? And then notice that this is static. What does it mean that this is static again? How does that? Every instance shares that value, right? Every instance shares that value. So if one instance increases this value, then all of the other instances of cheese will also see that value go up by 1, which is not true of these values, right? Non-static values are going to be different for every single instance, potentially. They could be, right? So here is the cheese model that was created in the prep work. You can see there's a way for IDs to be created and stored. In fact, the constructor does this for us, right? You can see the constructor takes care of setting the ID for us. And then we have a bunch of getters and setters down here that are going to be used for various purposes, including the coding example that we're going to take a look at in just a little bit. But this is our model for this particular application. This is the model. And we're going to start using this model a lot, and also we're going to be able to start talking about things like persistence again, bring databases back into the mix and store our models in the database so that they are permanent. And so we don't have to keep typing in Gouda 10 times every time I want to run my app, right? So that all is coming up. And these IDs will definitely help us with that piece as well when we start talking about persistence again, which is going to be very soon. Whoops, went to the wrong thing, sorry. All right, separation of concerns is something that's been mentioned multiple times throughout the class. How does it apply to the model specifically, though? That's what we're interested in talking about today, is the model. How does separation of concerns apply to the model part of our MVC project? We've already talked about what role the model plays, right? So, yeah.
In addition to simply separating the data we also went like one level further by separating the class of the model versus like the array list that represents like all of the.
That's right, yeah. The first thing that you said too, I think is very important. We separated the model out from our controller, right? Which I think is a very, very good thing that we did as part of the prep work today, because think about the implications of keeping those things tied together like they were in prior prep works. If the model changes, that means that I then have to go figure out how the controller is going to change, right? Because they're all mixed together. So I'm going to have to find all the various references to the model in the controller, which may or may not be straightforward depending on how complicated my controllers are. Whereas if we separate it off so that the model is completely separated in its own separate class, then if the model changes, it becomes a lot easier to code up those changes and reflect those changes in the other parts of my program. That is the big thing that separation of concerns tries to do for us: isolate the various things that need to happen so that they can change independently of the other parts without causing too much of a ripple effect, right, when things do need to change in our code. All right, last and certainly not least, what is model binding? What is that actually referring to? What is model binding? Where is it used? Anybody remember? Alex? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we saw it in the forms in the prep work, right? That's what you said. So we see that I have a form for creating a cheese in this particular application. And in the past, what we've done is we've grabbed the values out of the form. In this case, it would be, I think, a name and a description. And then we've made that cheese object ourselves. We've called the constructor, we make the new instance, and then we do whatever we need to with that instance that was created. Model binding tries to simplify this process for us. It says, okay, I know that you're making cheese, or actually we tell it, like, hey, this form is used for making cheese. And so if we do the model binding, the framework, Java, will take care of creating those objects for us so that we no longer have to. There are some rules that we have to follow to make this work properly, though. There's a couple different things that we need to make sure are set up properly. There is an example of this in the prep work, but real quick, can somebody tell me one of the things that we need to see in our code to make model binding work properly? I'm sorry? Default constructor, yeah, so we talked about this a little bit last time. What's a default constructor? A constructor with no parameters. Constructor with no parameters. I saw a couple people asking about this on Slack. Default constructors are created for you if you do not have any other constructors in your class. The second you write your own constructor, it's not going to create a default constructor for you, so then you will actually have to explicitly create it, which is a necessary part of using model binding. So if model binding is something you want to use, then you may have to write a default constructor. And actually, when we were looking at the cheese object a moment ago, you can see that there is a default constructor here, right? So that's one piece that we need in order to utilize model binding. What's another piece that we need to pay attention to in our code if we're using model binding? Yeah, go ahead. Yes, exactly right. So whatever I have here as the name of my fields has to match the values from the form as well. So you can see that I've got name and description here on the form so that the computer knows that, okay, the value in this text box is getting matched up with this field. The value in this text box is getting matched up with this field, right? What else? I'm sorry? The annotation, so that's going to be in which part of the code? The controller, yeah, in the controller. So if I look at the add cheese here, you can see that I've got this model attribute annotation, which is basically saying, hey, we're using model binding here, right? Look at the names from the form and look at the names of this cheese class and match them up, right? Match up these things. And so when we do this, you'll notice that it creates a cheese object for us. We don't have to create a new instance. We don't have to call the constructor. It does the mapping and then creates the object. How do the values actually get into the object? Yeah. Yeah, so if you'll notice, I skimmed over this a little bit earlier. We have getters and setters for the attributes that we care about. And so you're exactly right. Spring will call the setters for the attributes that it needs to. And you'll notice too that the way that we have this set up, right? I don't need to bind every single field of my object. In fact, we're only binding the name and the description. We are not binding the ID. We're actually letting the constructor, the default constructor in this case, take care of that ID logic. So, when somebody makes a cheese, they don't have to tell me what the ID number is. In fact, we probably don't want that, because how would they know which number it should pick? We want the computer to decide that for us, and so we can let some fields be chosen by the computer, and we can let some fields come from the model binding of our form. I think we've covered all of the pieces of model binding. It's a very, it's kind of a double-edged sword. It's actually a very powerful tool, can simplify things quite a bit, but that simplification can also cause confusion when people think, where the heck did this object come from, right? Because that now gets hidden from us. We don't actually see the object creation piece happen anymore. It's behind the curtain, so to speak. And so if you're not fully aware of the specifics of how model binding works and what all is going on, it can start to seem a little bit magical and perhaps confusing when you see an example of model binding in the code. So that's sort of the downside that you have to weigh when deciding whether or not to use model binding in your own applications. Are there any questions before we do a coding exercise? I think that was all the review stuff I had. Any questions? So we're going to take a look then at the prep exercise. I know some of you have already done this because I talked to you before class and it looked like you did a good job of going through this. I imagine some of you probably didn't get a chance to go through this exercise, so we're going to do it together as a group, and hopefully you'll help me out along the way. Our app right now has the ability to add and remove cheeses from the list. It does not have the ability to edit. So if I just want to change the name or the description of something, it does not have that ability. So that's what we're going to spend the next little bit working on, and that will of course involve a lot of interaction with the model. So we're going to follow the instructions. The instructions actually do a good job of listing step by step what we need to do to make this happen. So we can walk through this and talk about what's going on along the way. First thing it has us do is create a couple of methods in our controller class. And so the two methods that it wants us to create, there's one called display edit form and one called process edit form, right? Which is a pretty standard setup to what we've been doing. We have a similar setup for, adding cheeses, right? So I'm going to go ahead, we can actually just copy paste these directly. This is the completed prep work, by the way. This is the starting point that I'm using here, and it's exactly the code that you would have seen at the end of the prep work videos if you're coding along with me. So I just copied that one section of code, and I'm going to come down here and paste that in. I need to put some brackets to make that work. You can see it's unhappy about path variable annotation, so I can have IntelliJ import that for me. We actually have talked about path variables before, but it's been a little while, so we're going to maybe need to do a little bit of a refresher on that in a moment. Before we get to that, though, I'm going to go and copy this other one as well, process edit form. Copy that in here as well. We put in some brackets. Okay, and so this is, of course, the two handlers that we're going to use to display the form and then process the edit form results. So we're going to have to figure out how to fill these out as we go along. But we've got some other things to look at first. First, we need to set request mappings for these handlers, right? Specifying what routes they are being used for. They tell us they want them to work for the cheese/edit route. So I need to create a request mapping for both of these handlers, and we can kind of borrow one of the request mappings from one of these other ones to help us out here. I can just change this to edit. So we need to be a little bit careful. Let's have that discussion about path variables, right? The instructions here say that we want the route to look something like this, cheese/edit/some number, where that number is going to be the ID number of the cheese that we're trying to edit. So how do I say that in my request mapping that I want an additional number listed after this? I heard somebody say it, I think. Squiggly brackets, right? Squiggly brackets, and then what goes inside the brackets? So what does it mean when I see curly braces here. What is that telling us? I'm sorry? It's a URL segment. That is our path variable, right? Whatever goes inside of the curly braces is our path variable. So the name that should go in here is actually already been given to us. I have to put cheese ID inside of those curly brackets if I want it to work properly, because that's what my path variable has been called. That's how we set up our path variable properly. And so then whatever number ends up in these brackets is what's going to get set to this argument of our handler whenever this gets run. Does that make sense? It's been a little while since we've seen one of those, at least during class. I think they were in some of the homework assignments though. All right, and we need another request mapping for this guy, for the processing. That's going to be a post request, so I can scroll up here and try to find one with the post request, like this one here. And this one does not have, right? This one does not have a path variable involved. It's not necessary for it to have a path variable involved. So it's a little bit simpler. We can just have it say edit. And we have now set up the request mappings for both of these handlers. We have not said what these handlers are going to do yet. That's coming up, but we've set up starting methods, method signatures for our handlers. Are there any questions about this part, especially the path variable stuff, before we move on to the next step? All right. The next thing on our to-do list then is to create our template. We're going to try and keep it as simple as we can. You can see that it wants us to copy everything from our add cheese form into our edit cheese form, which makes sense, right? It's going to be the same fields, the same things, right? We're going to have to change the template a little bit, but I can just make a copy of my add template. Okay, so over here, here's my add template. I can actually just probably right-click and say copy, and then paste, and it will ask me to rename it since I can't have two files called add, so I'll change the name to be edit. Now I've got, I guess I don't need to add it to Git. Now I've got an edit template, and I just need to modify this edit template to do a couple of things. One of the things that I wanted to do is have the values of the cheese already in the box, right? So whatever values already exist for the cheese that I'm editing, I want to see that in the box so I can see what the existing values are, and then I can erase them and change them if I want to actually make a modification. In order to do that, I need to have a cheese object though, right? And right now there's no cheese object being passed from this template or being worked on with this template at all, right? But we can change that. That's something that we can do. In fact, you can see our next step here back in the display edit form handler. We're going to ask cheese data for the object with the given cheese ID and put it in the model so that our template has access to the cheese object that we are trying to edit. So we're going to start filling out this handler back here in the display edit form. So how do I access the cheese object that I want to modify? What do I need to start typing here? I want to access that cheese object. Which cheese object do I want to modify? If I make it this far, I know which one I want to modify, right? Which one is it? The one with this ID, right? So I need to have a way of looking up the object with that given ID, and that's kind of what the cheese data class is for. It's what it's all about, right? If I look at this, I can see that there is a method down here, a very useful method called getById, where I can pass in a particular cheese ID, and it's going to return this cheese object with that ID. So I just need to use that method. Now, real quick, this is a static method, right? What does that mean if it's a static method? We talked about static fields. What does it mean that this is a static method? How do I use this method? Name of the class. Yeah, this method belongs to the class, not to an instance of an object. I don't need an instance of the cheese data class in order to use this method. So if I want to call this method, I type the name of the class, which is cheese data dot get by ID, it's right there. And then I need to tell it which ID I'm looking for, which is called cheese ID. That's coming from our path variable, right? And then I probably want to save this in a variable. So cheese C equals that. Okay, so there's step one. I went to my cheese data class. I gave it the ID of the cheese that I care about. It's going to look it up and give me back the object. I now need to take that object and pass it into the model, right? So how do I do that? We've done this before. Model.add attributes, and then I have to give it a name, cheese C. There we go. And now we will have access to this cheese object within our template. There's actually only, I think, one more line I have to do to make this handler work, which is what? Return edit, right? Since that's the name of the template that we want to render here. So I've looked up the cheese object that I want to modify. I've added it to the model, which is passing it into the template. Now we can actually, let me make sure I'm not skipping a step before I go to next. Yeah. Now we can go back into our template and refer to the various fields of the cheese object so that we can fill those boxes in, right? I want to fill those boxes with the data that already exists from the cheese object. So how do I do that? Here is, here is one of the text boxes right here, right? How do I pull the name out of my cheese object and put it inside of this text box so that when people come to the page, they'll see what the name of this cheese is? How do I do that? Anybody know? I could call the getter method, yeah. Yes. Yeah, I think you're right. I think we could do it either way. I think there's a step we need to do before that, though, right? How do I actually tell it that I want to insert this into the text box? It's the value. So I need a th:\value equals. And now I need to do what you were describing, which is to pull the appropriate value out of the cheese object. How do I do that? What do I need to start typing if I want to pull the value out of my cheese object? $, curly brace. Oh, quotes, yeah. $, curly brace. What's the name of my cheese object? Cheese. That's what I called it in the controller when I passed it to the model, right? It's called cheese. Cheese. And then I want, this is the name box, correct? Yes, this is the name box. So I could say .name or I could say get name. I think either one would work. But that'll pull the name field out of the cheese object and put it inside of that text box so that when I load this form, I actually see that the form's already been filled in with the name. And I can do something very similar for the description, right? I can come down here and do another th:\value and put in cheese.description. And that should fill in the description with that text box. So then when I load this up, I can see it. And we can actually test this, right? We're actually already at a point, the instructions say you don't need to worry about testing until the very end. Well, we can test this right now, and I think it's probably good to test things as soon as you possibly can. We've written the handler. We should be able to display the form. If I want to run this, I should be able to see those values get put into the text box. We can test that and make sure that it works properly before we move on. Oops, uh-oh, I screwed something up. I got an error in my cheese controller class. Oh, yeah, because I haven't filled anything in for this handler yet. So I can just put in some dummy thing here for now with the idea that we'll fix it later. I'll just put in a redirect to the home page for now. I don't know if that's what we ultimately want to do or not, but I'm just going to put it in there so that I can try and run this and test it. All right. It's going to work this time. I think it's ready. So I can pull up localhost 8080/cheese. We have to add a cheese first, right? Cheddar, yellow. Okay. I'm going to add it to the list first, and then I don't have a link yet. Well, we can fix that a little bit later, but I know what the URL is supposed to look like, right? What ID do I think this cheese got? 1, probably. So if I want to edit this one, I should type in what? Edit/1. The ID that I think that cheese object got. Uh-oh. All right, so we got a problem. Error resolving template edit. Template might not exist. What happened? Does anybody see what I did? Cheese, yeah, cheese/edit. Now I gotta restart this whole thing. Whoops. My bad. Did I hit the wrong button? I thought I hit restart. There it goes. So maybe it worked, maybe it didn't. We're not sure. I mean, obviously we didn't get to the right template, but whether our template is correct or not, we still aren't sure. We gotta wait for this to fire up one more time, and we can check it. All right. Let's add a cheese again. Cheddar, yellow, add. All right, and now I can try to go to the edit form again. All right, cool, hey, it worked. It filled in the boxes with the values from that particular cheese. So we're making good progress, here. Any questions about what we've done so far? We're not done yet. Still got to do the processing side. There's actually, I think, a couple things we still need to do with the template. Number 7 down here, I think, is where we left off. It says to add a hidden input that holds the ID of the cheese. And they give you the code for this. So, we can just copy and paste this in, but I am not a big fan of just blindly copy and pasting stuff in without understanding what or why we are doing so, right? So as I copy this in, I want you to think and hopefully be able to tell me, why is this necessary? Why is this something that we need as part of our form? Why did I put this hidden input here with the cheese ID as its value? Why did I do that? Yeah. Yeah, when I submit this form, right, I need to actually make the changes to this cheese object. So I'm gonna need to know, I still need to know which cheese object is being modified so that I can look up that cheese object and actually make the changes that were submitted via this form. So this ID is gonna be used on the handler for the post request that we haven't gotten to yet. In fact, you can see that it's included right here. So, name came from the text box, the first text box, description came from the second text box. Where did this value come from? It came from that hidden input that we just saw, right? And it's hidden because do our users care about what the ID is? Not necessarily. Although I think the next thing that we're gonna do is actually tell them what the ID is. That's what the instructions tell us to do. Add a heading to the top that says edit cheese, name, ID, where we actually put in the actual name and the ID number for the cheese. I think this is the last thing that we need to do for our edit template. So let's do that real quick.
Can you change the value there where it says add cheese to edit cheese?
Oh yeah, good call. Edit cheese, thank you.
I think this is easy.
Yeah. All right, let's put a little header up here. I don't know, H2, I don't know, maybe that's a lot. Edit, and then what do I want to see? Edit cheese, and then the name. Oops. Cheese. How do I put the name in here? Anybody know? Am I doing this right? Yes. Yeah, so you're exactly right. I'm inserting the name, which means I have to use timeleaf. I have to access that object using timeleaf, which means that I can't start typing stuff like that. I need to do th::value. Or is it not value? Text? Well, we can fiddle around with that and figure out which one it is. And so now I can start saying edit cheese, right? How do I put the name in here? Anybody know? $ curly brace cheese.name. Will that work? We're about to find out, right? ID equals $ curly brace cheese dot, what's the name of the ID field? I don't remember. We can go look it up. Is it just ID? Cheese ID. Cheese ID. I think they wanted like parentheses around this part, maybe. I don't know. Will this work? Well, we're about to find out. Since I just edited the HTML, I shouldn't have to restart it, right? I should just be able to go back and load up the page and see if it looks the way that I want. So I should just be able to hit refresh here, and all right, we have a problem. Could not parse expression. Oh, shoot. Yeah, what's up? Mm-hmm. Single quotes. So let me, like this, include the double quotes, and then do single quotes, like this, and then a plus, and then plus, and then single quote. I'm just making sure that I'm understanding this properly here. Single quote plus single quote. Single quote? Did I get that? Did I miss a quote? Oh, on the outside, okay. Like that?
And then you get another plus sign between
right here, yeah. So that's tricky, right? That's not a super intuitive way about doing things, but you're exactly right with your description. Well, we haven't seen if it works yet. Let's actually save it and see if it does what we want it to do. Cool, yeah, it did. But your description was spot on there. We have to use concatenation. That's what the plus signs are for. We have to use concatenation. So any text that I just want to write out, I can write it out. And then I have to use a plus sign whenever I'm mixing in the time leaf stuff, the curly bracket $ syntax. I have to use concatenation. This is tricky. This is actually one of the things that I hate about time leaf, how complicated this is. If this tripped you up, you're not the only one. It trips me up all the time. I forget how to do this. I have to look up how to properly set values like this. But it will get better with practice, I promise. But thank you. Is there an easier way? Not to my knowledge, no. I wish, right? Let's write time leaf an email and be like, hey, what's going on? And they'll be like, yeah, whatever. You didn't concatenate your email properly. I'm not going to read it. Cool. We got it to work, though. So that's the good news. It looks good. Let's see what's next on our to-do list. I think we're getting pretty close to the end here. We have not done the process handler. I think that's our last major piece of this puzzle, right? So we need to get the cheese object with the given ID, and then we need to update the name and the description of that cheese. So let's go to our handler for processing the form, right? And so First thing I need to do is look up the cheese with the given ID. We know what the ID is. Again, remember, where did that value come from? This ID value? The form, that hidden input that we put in is the ID, right? So I need to look it up, actually, just like I did up here. Just like I did up here when I was displaying the form, this line of code will still work for me. And then I just need to modify, so now I have a new name and a new description that I want to use for this cheese object. So how do I give those to the cheese object? How do I change the name and the description? If you're unsure, you can say C dot and take a look and see and what methods are available. And I see, oh, set description, set name, right? I have setters for those fields. That's probably good, right? So I can say set name. What's the name of the variable? Is it just name? It is. It's just name. Name. C dot set description. And that should do it. That should change those fields, right? Grab the object by the ID, use the setters to change the values, and that should update the object. I think there was just one more thing that we needed to do. Oh yeah, we needed to add a link. But what does it say? It says redirect user to the home page. Oh, that's what I already did. Cool. So this redirect is actually what we wanted there. And then the last thing, I think this is the last thing. Yeah, the last thing is that we need to add this link to edit the cheese. So on our index page, we're going to add a link to edit the various cheeses. So I'm gonna pull up my index page here, and right now you can see that it's making a table, and I've got 2 cells in each row, one for the name and one for the description. I think the easiest way to do this is probably just to add a third one with the edit link. So I can come down here and add in a TD, right? Now this needs to be time leaf as well, correct? Because it's accessing the ID number to make the appropriate link. So I have to do th.text equals, and then paste this link in here. Is this gonna work as written? Actually, I'm not sure that I need to do it that way. Now that I look at it, I think I was overcomplicating it, sorry. I think I could just do this. Sorry, I made this more complicated. I think I could just put in the open close tag and then just paste the link in, because you can see it's already using time leaf to create the link. I was overthinking this one, but you'll notice that it does use the single quote concatenation syntax that we just saw a little bit ago to piece together this string for the URL so that it can insert the ID number of the cheese on the end to make it all work. All right, I think that's it. We're ready to test it for real this time. I did update the handler, so I do have to restart it, I believe, to make this work. I'll take just a second. While this is spinning up, does anybody have any questions about what we've done? All righty, well, let's test it and see if there's anything that we need to correct real quick, and then we can pat ourselves on the back for a job well done. All right, looks like it's up and running. So I'll come back here and go to the main page. No cheese. Okay. Name is cheddar, which I can't seem to spell today. Add cheese, and there's my edit button. It looks like I should have put maybe another header up here, so that's a little thing that I guess I could have done differently, but I can fix that really quick. See how I've only got 2 headers up here for name and description? Probably should have put a third one. Since I have 3 TDs, I should also have 3 THs, so I could just say edit. All right, that looks a little better, right? If I click the link, it takes me to our form that we set up, and it still works the same way as before. I can change this to be, something else, and the last thing that we haven't tested yet is to see if it actually works, right? If I hit the button, is it going to remember that I typed a different value in the box and work properly? Whoops. Shoot. So close. So close. There's actually a big hint on here as to what happened. Does anybody see? Post is not supported. There's actually another bigger hint about what happened here. Method not allowed. But so we set up our handler with post, though, I thought. Here's process edit form, and you can see that it's set up for post. So it's saying method not allowed, but I feel like I set the method up properly. There's another big clue on here. I was talking to somebody about this before class. Yeah, you know what's up. Yeah. Yeah. Well, so I'm not worried about slash error. But where did it send us? Look at the URL. Does that look right? It sent us to cheese/edit/1, which is the page that I should have used to, display the form and edit. But if you look at my handler, right? If you look at my handler here, I don't have that path variable on the end. Why did it send me there and not to where I thought it was going to send me? We didn't tell the form where to send us, so it just sent us to the same place. That's what it does, right? If I don't list an action on a form, if I don't tell the form where I want it to go, it's just going to send me to the same page. So that's what it did, but that's wrong. That's not what we wanted. So I should be able to fix this by updating my template, updating my form, and just putting in an action. So what should my action be? Cheese/edit, like that? Maybe. Well, we can try it out. We can try it out. I just have to go back, refresh my page. All right. Make the change again and hit the button. Ugh. So it kind of cheese/edit/cheese/edit. Uh-oh. It's a little tricky. It's a little tricky. We're very close. In fact, one more character will solve this problem for us. Yeah. No? Yeah.
According to Michelle here, if you don't put the slash at the very beginning
Mm-hmm.
of the action value, then it doesn't know that you're
At the root, yeah. So the slash out front means from the root, from the beginning, right? I want you to go to cheese/edit. If I leave the slash off, you're exactly right. It's going to just tack that value onto wherever I already am. We call that a relative link. So if I leave the slash off, it's going to send me here relative to where I am now. I was on cheese/edit. You told me you wanted to go to cheese/edit. So I'm going to send you to cheese/edit/cheese/edit. If I put a slash out in front, this is what we call an absolute link. I'm not saying that I want to go somewhere relative to where I am now. I'm saying this is the exact place that I want to go. It's the difference between, giving somebody directions based on, like, I want you to go to this address, right? 1 Brookings Drive, St. Louis, Missouri, right? That's where I want you to go, versus I want you to go around the block and then take a left at the light, right? That's the difference between an absolute route and a relative route, right? So this will actually fix our problem, I believe. Last time to change this, hit the button. Hey, there we go, we got it. It works now. Great. Any questions that I can answer about this exercise before we wrap up? Yeah, what's up?
So, in the control method, we're grabbing all of the data, choose values, your name, but we're not having to use the left layer like we did in something like that.
For the what now? Oh.
Okay, so in the table process,
Yeah.
you have to use the at
Oh, yeah.
in some other examples. And so I guess my question is, does that mean we don't necessarily have to use the
I suppose not, no. Yeah, I see what you're getting at. There was, what was the annotation? I don't remember what it is. Request parameter or something? We used it in remove? Where's remove? Request param? This guy? Is that what you're getting at? Yeah, you're right. Good eye. I did not notice that myself. I don't know what the rules are surrounding that, but we can certainly try to find out. Oops, swing. My bad. It knew what I meant. We can use request param. I mean, that's, yeah, I knew that's what it did, but I don't know. Yeah, I'm not seeing map query parameters from data. Well, no, actually, I don't know. I don't know why it was not necessary here. I know that they changed the form a little bit as part of the prep work, but I'm not sure that that has anything to do with it. Here's a question that I don't know whether it would work or not. You know, if I took it off of here, right, would that still work? I don't know. I don't actually know the answer to that question. Yeah, so it doesn't seem to be making a difference one way or the other for this particular example, correct? That's my interpretation. Yeah. So maybe it's not explicitly necessary. Certainly possible. It might be, well, I don't know. Anything that I say would be sort of an educated guess at this point, because I truly do not know the proper answer to this, but I'm willing to do some digging and see if I can't figure it out while you guys are working on Studio today. Let's just real quick, I won't take up too much more of your time, but let's just real quick see if remove might work without it. Remove. Oh, what's up with that box though? Yeah, it did. It worked without it. So it seems to be optional. Seems to be optional. As to why, I don't know the answer to that question, but it seems to me as though that annotation is optional. I'll get back to you on that one once I do a little bit of research. Does anybody have any other questions for me right now? All right, you do have a studio today. It involves users, I believe, if I'm remembering properly. Oh, I don't have it pulled up right now, but it's on the, it's in the usual spot. You also have the assignment that's due today, so let us know if you need to demo that or get some help with that. And we will regroup, as we usually do, around 8 o'clock to chat about today's studio. I'll see you all then.